What would happen if Oda kept his original draft for One Piece? Would Zoro be a henchman for Buggy and never join Luffy? Or would Doflamingo and the other warlords of the sea even exist? All these might sound like wild theories, but these were originally planned by Oda to be in the story of One Piece. I have spent countless days scouring all over the internet to find all the original drafts abandoned by Ichiro Oda and have put together 3 different timelines where the entire story of One Piece changes, starting with Timeline 1, where we explore the original concept for the Straw Hat Pirates, where Robin and Frankie were nowhere to be found and instead replaced by these 2 fine gentlemen. We are also taking the draft where Zoro never joins the Straw Hat Pirates, instead works as Buggy the Clown's personal bodyguard. Now, starting off with the first arc, everything stays the same until Luffy arrives at the first island with Kobe, but without Zoro there, it will be hard but not impossible for Luffy to defeat Axe Hand Morgan and save the island. But at Orange Town is where things are completely different. Luffy still meets Nami, and they team up to fight and defeat Buggy and his bodyguard, which is now Zoro with the help of Nami's trickery. Now, Luffy at this point is a lot stronger than Zoro, and Buggy was never that much of a challenge in the first place. Then at Syrup Village, they meet the Vice Captain Usopp. Yup, he was the vice captain of the crew in this version. But since there is no Robin, the Enies Lobby incident never occurs, and the Straw Hats never reach the level of infamy that they had in the original timeline. However, this story of the Straw Hats takes a dark turn in the end of the Thriller Bark arc. The story goes on as the same, and they defeat Moria, albeit with more difficulty without Zoro's help, and Kuma arrives this time as well. But since Zoro isn't there to face Kuma and stop him from ending Luffy like he did in the original, Kuma decides to execute Luffy, as we don't know Kuma's original intentions. And it may as well be that Kuma was inspired by Zoro at that time and decided to help the Straw Hats. And if that is the case, Luffy's journey sadly ends here. So Luffy and the crew never even reach the New World, because after Luffy gets taken out by Kuma, the Straw Hat Pirates get disbanded, and they either go their separate ways or decide to take their revenge on Kuma, in which case they would be severely hurt or even captured, as none of them are strong enough to defeat Kuma at this stage. Moving on to our second timeline, we see just how important Trafalgar Law is to the Straw Hat crew, as we explore the draft in which Oda made Law a minor character, where he would not even survive the New World. That's right. Oda originally wanted just Eustace Kid to be a bigger character, however did not have any plans for Law whatsoever. And Oda even stated that Law, along with half of the supernovas, would not even make it to the New World. This change, as you can already imagine, will send huge ripples in our timeline. Now, our story remains the same until we reach Punk Hazard. As Law wouldn't have survived the New World, he would not be a warlord of the sea and would not be present in Punk Hazard. Luffy would still beat Caesar and his cronies, but wouldn't be able to capture him like Law did by taking his heart. Of course, the alliance to defeat Kaido is not formed, and Luffy, without the alliance or Law's planning, does not actively plan to beat Kaido, but still makes his way to Dressrosa because of Kinemon and Momo. But again, without Law, the fight against the Don Quixote family and defeating them will be tough, but not impossible for Gear 4 Luffy. But our story, however, takes a big detour from here on out. As there is no plan to take out Kaido, Luffy goes to Whole Cake Island to fight against Big Mom to take over Fishman Island, as it's his territory even before Sanji is taken by her. And after that, the entire Whole Cake incident plays out as it did in the original timeline. They then make their way into Wano, but without Law's planning, it is highly unlikely that they rally all the samurai. Thus, the raid on Onigashima fails completely. After reaching Onigashima, Luffy still challenges Kaido on the Skull Dome while Kid fights Big Mom alone, while the Beast Pirates fight the few samurai and mink forces that arrived along with the Straw Hat and Kid Pirates. But even after a tough fight, Luffy and Law cannot beat Kaido and Big Mom, and Luffy is ultimately defeated and thrown off the Skull Dome. Now, without Law's submarine to save him, he drowns and never awakens into Joyboy. After Luffy's defeat, Kid would not survive alone against Big Mom either. And as the leaders of the raid fall, the Straw Hats lose their wills to fight. And since Kaido wants to break strong people and make them part of their crew, it is most likely that all the Straw Hats will be captured by Kaido and held prisoners like how Luffy and Kid were. But due to their loyalty, none of the Straw Hats would ever join Kaido, and eventually, the story of the Straw Hat Pirates would perish. However, the only way you can save our beloved crew is by Red Rock punching that subscribe button. Moving on, our third and final timeline is where the biggest change of them all happens. When we think about the world of One Piece, the 7 warlords of the sea immediately pops into our heads. They seem irreplaceable, but that wasn't Oda's original plan. Oda actually wanted One Piece to be a story of the Straw Hats against the 4 emperors of the sea. Our timeline remains unchanged till we arrive at the Alabasta Kingdom. Without Crocodile there to steal the rain and create chaos, there is no conflict in Alabasta. Thus, Robin never meets the Straw Hats, and they never know about the poneglyphs. Furthermore, the Alabasta Kingdom never allies themselves with the Straw Hat Pirates. The Skypiea incident remains the same, but they never understand Roger's message as they can't read the poneglyph. Again, they never fight CP9, but Frankie joins the crew after their visit to Water 7. However, Luffy's bounty at this point would be very low, as the world government would not consider him much of a threat, as both Moria and Kuma would not exist for Luffy to defeat, and there won't be a thriller bark either. But as you've guessed, the Sobati Archipelago is where we would start seeing the major changes in this timeline. After the incident at the auction house, Luffy would be obliterated by a single pacifista, because Luffy in this timeline isn't as battle-hardened or as experienced as he never fought any of the warlords. Luffy wouldn't be saved from Kizaru as Kuma would not exist, but even if by luck they would survive by Rayleigh's intervention, this defeat and gap in power would be crushing for our crew. Later, Luffy still learns about Ace's capture by the Blackbeard pirates. Knowing Luffy, he would rush to impel down to save Ace, ultimately following the same path as the original. However, this time, the entire Straw Hat crew would reach the battlefield of Marineford. But in the brutal war, Luffy would be weaker and inexperienced than he was in the original timeline, and would barely be able to survive the ordeal. Thus, the chances of all our crewmates returning safe is slim to none, as Luffy would most probably be captured by the Marines, as he is after all Dragon's son, and the surviving Straw Hats would make a strategic retreat. But Shanks, upon knowing about Luffy's capture, would attack the Marines as he had put the hope of the future on Luffy's shoulder, and the remaining Straw Hats would join them along with Rayleigh. Now, Shanks being ready to fight and the Marines already battle-weary would eventually lose to the red-haired pirates, and Luffy would meet Shanks and vow to be stronger. The time skip still takes place, but Zoro never has the drive to surpass Mihawk since he doesn't exist. Thus, he will be significantly weaker as he doesn't train under him either. And after the time skip and reuniting, they skip Dressrosa. There is no deal to be made with Doflamingo. Therefore, we don't see Luffy's first gear 4th transformation until Whole Cake Island, where he would beat Cracker with a lot of difficulty, but would come short against Katakuri, as this Luffy is much more inexperienced and has only used gear 4 in combat only once before. So he would never escape the mirror dimension, but the other Straw Hats would be able to somehow escape, believing that Luffy would get out. Sanji would stay behind, and the crew would most likely be disbanded. Usopp returning to Kaya, and Nami returning to Kokoyashi Village. Chopper would return to the Doctrine, and Frankie would return to Water 7 to work with Iceberg. Zoro would roam the world in atonement, as he couldn't save his captain nor make him the Pirate King. The Straw Hats would eventually grow sad and old, as none of them got to achieve their dreams. I guess this was the bad Straw Hat timeline Oda was talking about. Now check out these 21 facts about One Punch Man that you probably didn't know.